Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight, and I thank Pastor John and all the good people in Christian Voice Ireland for making this night happen. It's so important that events like this do happen, and I know that we're going to be able to make a difference in people's lives here tonight. My name is Senator Sharon Keogan. I'm an independent senator in Seanad, Eireann since 2020, and since my election, I've been using my position as an independent with no affiliation with any political party to raise the issues that other politicians wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Because if they spoke the truth about it, there'd be a pile-on Twitter and their party would drop them faster than they could say cancel culture. In the Senate chamber, I speak out about the impacts of the scourge of abortion on the preborn children and women of Ireland, the cultural attacks on the marital family, and more lately, and increasingly persuasive, state-sponsored gender confusion that's foisted on our children. As I prepared for this evening, I was reminded of a story I heard before about two builders, one old and experienced, and the young one, and he was only newly trained. As they were walking through the centre of an old European city, the younger builder points to the huge, magnificent cathedral whose shadows they were walking in and asks the older builder, "Why don't we build anything like that anymore?" The older builder thinks for a moment before turning and saying, "To build a cathedral, you need conviction. And nowadays, everyone only has opinions." It certainly feels that way in Leinster House, where most politicians aren't leaders at all, but instead are slaves to popularity, to trends, and to the modern progressive zeitgeists. They operate their flags like flags going any way the wind blows, and their opinions are always those that they think will be most beneficial to them. While there are still some good men and women in Dáil Éireann and the Seanad, I know Deputy Peadar Tobin spoke here in July. It can often feel, for those still speaking the truth, that their voices are crying out in the wilderness. And so it is very nice to be in a room full of people with conviction here tonight. All of us are here because we have conviction. We are convicted by our faith, by our beliefs about family, about men and women, and about our children. We see what is happening in the world, the intentional eroding of parental rights, the ideological capturing of our government, and the institution by radical activists, and the indoctrination of our children into the cult of gender ideology. I'm aware that I'm sharing the stage with two pastors, so I'm not going to try and delve into biblical sexuality and the theory of the body, but I can explain a bit of what is happening in our schools and share my thoughts as to why this is happening, as well as what we should be doing in response. The official school curriculum for primary and secondary education in Ireland is set by the Minister of Education, currently Deputy Norman Foley, who is heavily influenced by a body called the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, which is a statutory body of the Department of Education. In May of this year, the NCCA published the updated Social, Personal and Health Education, the SPHE curriculum for junior cycle students, for students from first year to third year, aged 12 to 15 and 16. While some observers and commentators had made foreboding predictions as to what content would be produced by the NCCA, many parents were completely blindsided by the level of purely ideological content being presented as undisputed truth, the graphic nature of some of the content, and the teaching of topics which are completely age inappropriate. Under the guidelines, children as young as 12 will be discussing online porn, the ins and outs of consent in sexual relationships, their own so-called gender identity, and that of others, as well as their sexual orientation. Topics covered will include consent, intimacy, and mutual pleasure, and how to spot the signs of abusive and violent relationships. Pupils will also learn about responses to unplanned pregnancies and accessing health sexual services. So in the eyes of the government, our 12-year-olds must know how to get an abortion if they get pregnant. Children would also be taught how harmful attitudes about gender are perpetuated in the media, online and in society, and how to confront this. What harmful attitudes are being referred to? We can only guess that they mean offensive, outdated statements such as men are men and women are women, and one cannot become the other, or men and women are different, or even only men, only women can give birth and be mothers. Under the new NCCA curriculum, your children will be taught to confront such ideas. Their teachers will equip them with talking points to debate and to refute any such assertions that may be made to them by anyone, even by you. Public schools are now inoculating children against Christian teaching. It is stated in the early learning outcomes for junior cycle students that students should appreciate that sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression are core parts of human identity, and that each are experienced alongside a spectrum, and that a child can be a boy, girl, neither, or both, irrespective of the sex they were assigned at birth. Children will be asked to make presentations and describe how they can be supported to trans-identify individuals, and how to give advice for how people can support those treated unfairly because of the way they express their gender. In none of this content is it mentioned at all of this radical teaching is less than 30 years old, that the foundation ideology of it is a shocking recent modern invention, the long-term impact of which can only be guessed at. And in none of this teaching is there any debate encouraged or even allowed. Quite the opposite. Children are taught how to teach and defend trans ideology using material generated by LGBTQIA advocacy groups like TENI, Belong To and Glen, all with the view of normalising this particular worldview and indeed presenting it as the only socially acceptable view to hold. Support for this view is referred to with words like diversity and inclusion, while opposition to it is referred to with such terms as bullying and hatred. And we're seeing the fruits of this already. Multiple teenagers from across the country have gone public with their experience of ostracization and bullying on account of being transphobic, and their defence of biological truth and traditional values. The acceptance of diversity preached by the gender cult does not extend to them. The progressives will only accept diversity of gender and sexual orientation. When it comes to thought, only sanctioned thoughts are acceptable, and these are policed relentlessly. You may be taking this all in and thinking, how did we get here? Now, to answer the question fully, would take up the rest of the evening and then some. If you really want to go back to the roots of it, you can investigate the figures of Alfred Kinsey and John Money. But the long and short of it is that there are three groups that have made or allowed this to happen. The first group are the radical activist ideologues in positions of power in the state who are actively pursuing this agenda. The second group are the run-of-the-mill politicians who do the bidding of those who shout the loudest, as they want to be popular and get re-elected. And three, those who disagree with the first two, but are too scared to say anything in case they lose their jobs. The first group is the smallest, the people who are full converts to the cult of gender are small in number, but they have outsized influence on account of occupying high political office and senior civil servant positions. Using their positions, they can channel money into radical NGOs such as Tenny, Belong To, Glen. This allows these NGOs to become the loudest voice in the room and spread their message to the second group, who accept the narrative and follow along. Finally, the repeated messaging of the first two groups that anyone who opposes them or disagrees is backward, hateful, bigoted, and even evil causes the third group to keep their dissent to themselves and their heads below the parapet, so as not to cause harm to themselves or their families. As Deputy Tobin said in July, the mainstream media is creating a scenario where people are led to feel that they are the minority with their opposition to gender ideology being taught to children, when in fact, he said, this is the view held by the majority. Most polling that's been done has shown that the majority of parents think it's wrong that children in primary schools are being taught about transgenderism. The kicker is, the size of the third group is vastly larger than any of the other two groups combined. The radical activists know that they cannot win against the majority who disagree with them. So they make every attempt to project their propaganda at the third group, saying, you are not the minority, everyone is on our side. If you stand up, you will be alone, and we will crush you. Our victory is a foregone conclusion, except that you have lost and move on. It is in the rejection of this lie that must be the crux of our response to this madness. The only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. All of you have taken a huge step in the fight by coming here tonight and equipping yourself with this information. The belt of truth buckled around your waist. Now we must take action. Removing or limiting the second category of persons is key. We must alert the politicians that this is an issue that will affect them where it hurts, at elections. Write to your local politicians and express your concerns. Call them. Go to their constituency clinics. Make sure they know that they will never get a single vote from you if they do not speak up and speak out against the radical gender ideology that has been marched into our schools. Go to parentsrightalliance.com, where they have letters, templates to request that your child be removed from RSE, SP, HE classes and send them to your school principal. Sufficient volume of these across the country will raise flags and generate important discussions. In fact, it was brought to my attention that the Education Act of 1998, Section 9D, states that the school shall provide education to students which promotes the moral, spiritual, social and personal development of students and provide health education for them in consultation with their parents and having regard to the characteristic spirit of the school. This means that you, as a parent, are entitled to be consulted by your child's school when it comes to their moral and health education being provided there. You can write to the principal of the Parents' Council and ask that a consultation take place where you can make your voice heard. If the school do not properly consult with the parents, they are breaking the law. Remind them of that. And finally, perhaps most importantly, let other parents know. Talk to people and tell them what you have learned here tonight. Get educated, get informed and share your knowledge, and that the truth of what is going on with other people. Many, many people out there simply do not know what is happening. So we have to get the word out there. Get everyone informed so that we can gather political momentum and critical mass. I've seen it in action in Leinster House. The political class can ignore a lot when it suits them, but there certainly is a limit to it. Eventually, they have to take notice. That's what we have to do now. We go out there, we make ourselves heard. This is not a lost battle. We have the majority. We have the conviction. And we have the truth. Down with the evil and up with the right. Ours is the victory.